You don't need more motivation. You need a system that makes discipline effortless. This audiobook will show you how to trick your brain into unstoppable success, so you never rely on willpower again. The Discipline Hack. Audiobook. Introduction. Think about the last time you tried to build a new habit. Maybe it was working out, eating healthier, or finally writing that book. You started with incredible enthusiasm, convinced that this time would be different. This time, you'd stay motivated. This time, you'd push through the resistance. But then, life happened. The initial excitement wore off. That morning, alarm felt harder to answer. The pull of Netflix grew stronger than your workout plans. The blank page stayed blank. And now here you are, feeling like you've failed again. Wondering if maybe you're just not cut out for success. If you're simply not disciplined enough. I'm here to tell you something that will change everything. You haven't failed at discipline. Discipline, as you know it, has failed you. The entire concept of discipline you've been taught is fundamentally flawed. It's built on the false premise that success comes from forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. That achievement requires constant internal battles against your own nature, that you need to become a different person to succeed. But what if I told you that real discipline isn't about fighting yourself at all? What if the key to unstoppable execution isn't more willpower, but less resistance? What if you could make success feel as natural as breathing? The truth is, your brain is already perfectly designed for success. You just haven't learned how to work with its programming instead of against it. Everything you think is holding you back. Procrastination, distraction, lack of motivation. These aren't character flaws. They're simply outdated survival mechanisms that can be rewired. Chapter 1. Motivation is a scam. You know that surge of motivation that hits you late at night or first thing in the morning? That powerful feeling that this time will be different, this time you'll follow through? It's intoxicating. It feels like rocket fuel for your dreams. But by mid-afternoon, that fuel has evaporated, leaving you wondering what happened to all those ambitious plans you had just hours ago. This isn't a personal failure. You haven't somehow squandered your motivation or proven yourself weak. You've simply fallen for one of the most pervasive myths in personal development. The idea that motivation comes first and action follows. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, "I'll start when I feel ready," or "I just need to get motivated first"? We've been conditioned to believe that motivation is the spark that ignites action. But this gets the entire equation backwards, and it's costing you precious time and momentum. The truth about motivation is both liberating and challenging. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. This isn't just feel-good advice. It's backed by decades of psychological research into human behavior and habit formation. When you wait for motivation to strike before taking action, you're essentially waiting for an emotional state that's designed to come after you begin, not before. Consider Stephen King's approach to writing. One of the most prolific and successful authors of our time, King doesn't wait for inspiration to strike before sitting down at his desk. Instead, he follows the same routine every single morning. He sits down at 8 a.m. and writes until he hits his 2,000-word quota. Rain or shine, inspired or not, feeling it or not, he takes action first. The scariest moment is always just before you start, King once said. After that, things can only get better. This philosophy has enabled him to publish over 60 novels, with more than 350 million copies sold worldwide. But here's what's fascinating. King admits that some days he sits down feeling completely uninspired. Yet by taking action, by simply beginning, he generates the very motivation that most people spend their lives waiting for. This principle extends far beyond writing. It applies to every area of life where you're seeking improvement. The key is to flip the script. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, you need to build systems that trigger action regardless of how you feel. Let's break down how this works in practice. Your brain is wired to conserve energy and avoid uncertainty. When you rely on motivation, you're essentially hoping that an emotional state will overcome these powerful biological drives. But when you focus on action first, you bypass this internal resistance entirely. Here's how to make this work for you. Start with actions so small they seem ridiculous. We're talking about steps that take less than 5 minutes to complete. Want to build a workout habit? Don't start with an hour at the gym. Start with putting on your workout clothes. Want to write more? Don't aim for chapters. Start with opening your laptop and writing one sentence. Take Leo's story, for example. An artist who had been putting off exercise for years, Leo kept waiting for the perfect moment when he'd feel ready to start his fitness journey. He had all the right equipment at home, had read countless fitness articles, and knew exactly what he should be doing. But month after month, he remained stuck in planning mode, waiting for motivation to strike. Then Leo learned about the action-first approach. Instead of trying to motivate himself to do a full workout, he committed to doing just 5 push-ups every morning, right after brushing his teeth. It seemed almost too easy, but that was exactly the point. The action was so small that his brain couldn't come up with excuses to avoid it. Something interesting happened after a few days. Leo found himself naturally wanting to do more than just 5 push-ups. Some mornings he'd add a few squats. Other days he'd throw in some jumping jacks. Within weeks, he had naturally built up to 15-minute workout sessions. Not because he forced himself, but because taking that initial action generated momentum that led to more action. The key insight from Leo's experience wasn't just that he started exercising. It was that the motivation to exercise more came after he started taking action, not before. This is the critical shift you need to make in your own life. Your challenge for the next week is simple but powerful. Choose one goal you've been putting off until you feel motivated enough. Now, identify the smallest possible action you could take toward that goal, something that takes less than 5 minutes. Commit to taking that tiny action every day for the next 7 days, regardless of how you feel. Don't wait for motivation. Don't wait until you're ready. Just take that small action and watch what happens. Chapter 2. The Willpower Trap. You're staring at your phone again. It's 11 p.m., and despite promising yourself you'd be in bed by 10, here you are, scrolling mindlessly. Your tired brain knows you should sleep, but your thumb keeps moving, almost with a mind of its own. In this moment, your willpower feels like a distant memory, replaced by the hypnotic pull of the screen. Sound familiar? That's because you're caught in the willpower trap, believing that with enough mental strength, you can force yourself to make the right choice every time. But here's what nobody tells you. Relying on willpower is like trying to hold your breath underwater. You might succeed for a while, but eventually, biology wins. The science behind this is fascinating. Research shows that willpower operates like a muscle. It fatigues with use. Each decision you make, each temptation you resist, depletes your mental energy. By the end of a long day, your willpower reservoir is often running on empty. This explains why even the most disciplined people tend to break their good habits in the evening. But here's where it gets interesting. The most successful people don't actually have more willpower than you. They've simply learned to stop relying on it altogether. Take Barack Obama's approach during his presidency. Facing countless critical decisions daily, Obama recognized that willpower was a finite resource. His solution? Eliminate unnecessary choices. He wore only gray or blue suits, ate the same breakfast daily, and followed rigid routines. "I don't want to make decisions about what I'm eating or wearing," he explained to Vanity Fair, "because I have too many other decisions to make." This wasn't just presidential efficiency. it was cognitive science in action. By removing trivial decisions, Obama preserved his mental energy for matters of national importance. He understood what many of us miss. The key to consistent discipline isn't strengthening your willpower, it's reducing your need for it. Think about this in terms of cognitive load theory. Your brain has a limited amount of processing power each day. Every decision you make, no matter how small, consumes some of that power. When you rely on willpower to make good choices, you're essentially hoping that your brain will have enough energy left to choose correctly when the moment comes. But what if you could remove the need for that decision entirely? This is where environmental design becomes your secret weapon. Instead of trying to resist temptation, you can simply remove it from your environment. Instead of forcing yourself to make good choices, you can make those choices automatic through strategic pre-commitment. Consider the difference between these two scenarios. You're trying to eat healthier. In scenario A, you keep your kitchen stocked with both healthy and unhealthy foods, telling yourself you'll choose the healthy option through sheer willpower. In scenario B, you remove all junk food from your house and pre-prep healthy meals for the week. Which scenario is more likely to succeed? This brings us to Rachel's story. A busy marketing executive, Rachel struggled with late-night snacking for years. Every evening followed the same pattern. She'd promise herself she wouldn't raid the pantry, spend hours resisting the urge, then eventually give in around midnight. She blamed herself for lacking discipline, not realizing she was setting herself up for failure by relying on willpower alone. Then Rachel learned about environmental design. Instead of trying to strengthen her willpower, she completely restructured her environment. She removed all processed snacks from her house, pre-portioned healthy alternatives into grab-and-go containers, and set up an automatic timer that turned off her kitchen lights at 8 p.m. as a gentle reminder that the kitchen was closed. The results were immediate and dramatic. Without unhealthy options readily available, Rachel's late-night snacking habit virtually disappeared. Not because she suddenly developed iron discipline, but because she removed the need for willpower entirely. This principle extends far beyond eating habits. Want to spend less time on social media? Delete the apps from your phone instead of relying on willpower to resist checking them. Trying to save money? Set up automatic transfers to your savings account rather than trusting yourself to manually save each month. Looking to exercise more? Lay out your workout clothes the night before and sleep in your gym shorts. The key is to identify decision points in your life where you typically rely on willpower, and then systematically eliminate those decision points through environmental design. This isn't cheating. It's working with your brain's natural tendencies instead of against them. Here's how to start. Identify your willpower battlegrounds, those moments when you typically struggle to make the right choice. For each battleground, ask yourself, how can I remove the decision entirely? Create systems that make good choices automatic and bad choices require extra effort. Think of it like setting up guardrails on a mountain road. The guardrails don't restrict your freedom. They simply make it easier to stay on track and harder to veer off course. Chapter 3. Embracing Discomfort. You're sitting there right now, waiting for the perfect moment. That magical time when everything lines up, when you feel completely ready, when the fear subsides. But deep down, you know that moment will never come. Because comfort is the enemy of growth, and your brain's desperate search for readiness is actually a sophisticated form of self-sabotage. Think about the last time you faced something challenging. Your heart raced, your palms got sweaty, and your mind flooded with reasons to wait, to prepare more, to delay until you felt ready. This isn't weakness. It's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do: protect you from perceived threats. But in today's world, where most threats aren't physical, this protective instinct often holds you back from the very experiences that could transform your life. The neuroscience behind this is clear. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, can't distinguish between physical danger and psychological discomfort. When you contemplate stepping outside your comfort zone, it triggers the same stress response as if you were facing a predator. This made perfect sense for our ancestors, but in today's world, it's become a barrier to growth. Arnold Schwarzenegger's journey perfectly illustrates the power of embracing discomfort. In 1968, at age 21, he left Austria for America with broken English and little money. The conventional wisdom would have been to stay home, build a safe life in the family business, and avoid the uncertainty of chasing an unlikely dream in a foreign country. But Arnold understood something crucial. The biggest risks in life aren't in taking bold action, they're in playing it safe. He didn't just accept discomfort, he actively sought it out. In his training, he would purposely seek the exercises that hurt the most, knowing they would trigger the most growth. When others avoided the pain of failure, he welcomed it as feedback. "The more you go through pain," Schwarzenegger said, "the more you become numb to it, until you build up a resistance to it." This wasn't just about physical pain, it was about emotional and psychological discomfort too. Every time he faced ridicule for his accent, every rejection from a casting director, every political setback, these weren't obstacles to avoid, but opportunities to strengthen his discomfort muscle. This brings us to a crucial insight. Comfort is not your friend. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're essentially telling your brain that safety is more important than success. This creates a self-reinforcing loop where the desire for comfort grows stronger, while your tolerance for discomfort weakens. The solution isn't to simply push through discomfort, it's to systematically recondition your relationship with it. This is where the discomfort conditioning method comes in. Instead of waiting to feel ready, you deliberately expose yourself to progressively challenging situations, building your tolerance like a muscle. Start small. Take a cold shower for 15 seconds. Speak up in a meeting when your heart is racing. Wake up 30 minutes earlier than usual. Each time you survive these small discomforts, your brain learns that discomfort isn't fatal, it's transformative. Noah's story demonstrates how this works in practice. A designer with dreams of starting his own company, Noah would break into a cold sweat at the mere thought of networking. The idea of walking into a room full of strangers and talking about himself felt overwhelming. Instead of waiting to feel confident, Noah applied the discomfort conditioning method. He started by attending a small tech meetup, committing only to stay for 30 minutes. His hands shook as he introduced himself to one person. But he survived. The next week, he stayed for an hour and spoke to 2 people. Each small victory expanded his comfort zone. Within 6 months, Noah wasn't just attending networking events, he was organizing them. The discomfort hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed from a barrier into a signal that he was growing. This shift in perspective changed everything. When he finally launched his startup, the challenges that would have once paralyzed him became exciting opportunities for growth. Your comfort zone isn't a place to live. It's a place to visit occasionally for rest. Real growth, real achievement, real transformation. These only happen when you're willing to step into discomfort regularly and intentionally. For the next week, commit to one small act of intentional discomfort each day. Start that conversation you've been avoiding. Sign up for that class that intimidates you. Share your work before it feels ready. Document how each experience affects you. You'll discover that discomfort, like any other sensation, loses its power over you with exposure. Remember, the discomfort you feel is not a warning to retreat. It's an invitation to grow. Chapter 4. Hijacking your brain's reward system. You reach for your phone without even realizing it. Your fingers move automatically, opening apps, scrolling feeds, chasing that next hit of digital stimulation. Hours slip away, and that important work you plan to do, it's still waiting, untouched. This isn't a failure of discipline. It's a carefully engineered hijacking of your brain's reward system. The truth about distraction is more sinister than you might think. Every notification, every scroll, every like triggers a tiny burst of dopamine in your brain. It's the same neurochemical that motivated our ancestors to hunt, gather, and survive. But now, it's being weaponized against you by teams of engineers and psychologists who understand exactly how to keep you hooked. This isn't speculation, it's science. Studies from Stanford University's Department of Neuroscience have shown that the same neural pathways activated by addictive substances light up when we receive social media notifications. Your brain literally can't tell the difference between the dopamine hit from a Twitter like and the one from finding food when starving. But here's what's really fascinating. Dopamine isn't actually about pleasure. It's about anticipation. That's why you keep scrolling even when it doesn't make you happy anymore. Your brain is chasing the possibility of reward, not the reward itself. This explains why checking email or refreshing social media feels so compelling, even when you know there's nothing important waiting for you. Take how Elon Musk approaches this challenge. Despite running multiple billion-dollar companies, he's managed to harness his dopamine system to serve his goals rather than derail them. When asked about his productivity secrets, Musk revealed that he structures his entire day around making progress addictive. Instead of letting his brain chase random dopamine hits, he creates what he calls success loops, small, achievable milestones that provide constant feedback and reward. Each engineering problem solved, each design approved, each milestone reached triggers the same reward pathways that social media exploits. But instead of leading to distraction, these dopamine hits drive him toward his goals. The brain adapts to whatever you feed it, Musk explained in a 2018 interview. If you make progress rewarding, your brain will crave progress instead of distraction. This isn't just about willpower. It's about understanding and redirecting your brain's natural reward system. The key is to understand that your brain will seek dopamine whether you plan for it or not. You can either let this drive you toward distractions, or you can deliberately engineer your environment to make progress more rewarding than procrastination. This is where the dopamine redirection protocol comes in. Instead of fighting your brain's reward system, you'll learn to hack it. The protocol has 3 core components. First, you need to create a dopamine reset by temporarily removing artificial sources of stimulation. This doesn't mean eliminating all pleasure. It means clearing out the cheap, engineered dopamine hits that have hijacked your reward system. Second, you'll learn to build what neuroscientists call reward stacking, combining productive activities with natural dopamine triggers. This could mean listening to your favorite music only while working out, or enjoying your morning coffee only while tackling important tasks. Third, you'll establish progress triggers, small, visible ways to measure advancement that give your brain the feedback it craves. This turns goal pursuit itself into a source of dopamine, making discipline feel effortless. Ava, a novelist struggling with focus, provides a perfect example of how this works in practice. Like many writers, she found herself constantly derailed by social media and streaming services. Every time she sat down to write, the siren call of quick dopamine hits would pull her away from her manuscript. Instead of relying on willpower, Ava applied the dopamine redirection protocol. She started by removing her phone from her writing space entirely, not just putting it on silent, but physically placing it in another room. This eliminated the strongest source of competing dopamine. Next, she created a reward stacking system. She would only allow herself to drink her favorite tea while writing, and she set up a small bell that she would ring every time she completed 500 words. These simple actions paired natural rewards with progress, making the act of writing itself more dopamine triggering than scrolling social media. Finally, she established clear progress triggers. She used a simple tracking system where she could see her daily word count growing, and she shared weekly progress updates with her writing group. Each small win, each bit of recognition, each visible sign of progress fed her brain's reward system in a way that made writing increasingly addictive. Within weeks, Ava noticed something remarkable. She actually craved her writing sessions. The urge to check social media hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had been replaced by a stronger desire, the pull toward progress and achievement. Your brain's reward system isn't your enemy. It's a tool waiting to be properly used. When you understand how dopamine really works, you can turn it from a source of distraction into a driver of discipline. The next 48 hours are crucial for rewiring your reward system. Choose one artificial dopamine source: social media, news feeds, video games, or whatever tends to derail your focus, and completely eliminate it. But don't stop there. Replace it with a productive activity that includes clear progress markers and small, natural rewards. Pay attention to how your brain responds. Notice the initial discomfort, but also notice how quickly your mind begins to seek reward in new places. This isn't about depriving yourself. It's about redirecting your brain's natural reward system toward what truly matters. Remember, your dopamine system will drive your behavior whether you control it or not. The only question is whether it will drive you toward distraction or toward your dreams. Chapter 5. The 2-Minute Revolution. You stare at your to-do list, feeling that familiar weight of overwhelm. Work out for an hour. Write that report. Start the project. Each task looms like a mountain, and suddenly checking your phone seems like a much better option. But what if the problem isn't your discipline? It's the size of the steps you're trying to take. Think about the last time you faced a cold pool. Jumping in feels impossible, but dipping in one toe? That's manageable. Your brain works the same way with every challenge. When faced with a big task, it automatically resists. This isn't weakness. It's neurology. Your brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid potential threats, and anything that seems too challenging gets flagged as a threat. The science behind this is fascinating. Research has shown that when we perceive a task as overwhelming, our amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, activates, triggering our fight-or-flight response. This makes procrastination feel like a survival instinct rather than a choice. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, demonstrates this principle perfectly through his own journey and research. After suffering a severe baseball injury in high school that required extensive rehabilitation, Clear didn't set out to become an athlete again immediately. Instead, he started with a goal so small it seemed ridiculous. He would go to the gym for just 2 minutes. Clear explains, "The secret to getting started is to break your complex, overwhelming tasks into small, manageable steps, then break them down again." This approach helped him not only recover, but eventually become a top college athlete, and later one of the world's leading experts on habit formation. Clear's genius wasn't in having more willpower than others. It was in understanding that the size of your initial action matters more than your ultimate goal. By making the barrier to entry almost laughably low, he bypassed his brain's resistance entirely. This insight revolutionizes how we approach discipline. Instead of trying to force yourself into hour-long workouts or marathon writing sessions, you start with actions so small they don't trigger resistance. The 2-minute revolution isn't about doing less, it's about starting smaller. Here's how it works in practice. Rather than committing to getting in shape, you commit to doing 1 push-up. Instead of becoming a reader, you commit to reading 1 page. Rather than learning meditation, you commit to taking 2 conscious breaths. These micro-commitments might seem too small to matter, but that's exactly why they work. They slip under your brain's threat detection radar, allowing you to build momentum without resistance. Once you're in motion, continuing becomes dramatically easier. It's that first step that requires the most energy. This aligns perfectly with Newton's first law of motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Your habits follow the same principle. The hardest part isn't continuing, it's starting. Think of your willpower like a heavy door. Pushing it open requires significant force, but once it's moving, keeping it in motion takes much less energy. The 2-minute revolution is about finding the smallest possible push that can get that door moving. Ethan, a software developer who had tried and failed to establish a consistent workout routine for years, provides a perfect example of this principle in action. Like many, he would start ambitious workout plans only to abandon them within weeks. His breakthrough came when he stopped trying to transform into a gym enthusiast overnight. Instead, Ethan committed to just one push-up every morning right after brushing his teeth. It seemed almost silly at first. How could one push-up make any difference? But something interesting happened. Most days, once he got down to do that single push-up, he found himself doing more. Not because he had to, but because he was already there, already in motion. Within a month, Ethan had built a consistent morning workout routine, not by forcing himself to spend hours at the gym, but by making the starting threshold so low that his brain couldn't find a reason to resist. That single push-up became 5, then 10, then a full workout routine. The key wasn't the quantity of exercise, it was removing the activation energy required to begin. The 2-minute revolution works because it acknowledges a fundamental truth about human behavior. We're more likely to follow through on tasks that don't feel overwhelming. By shrinking your initial commitment to something that takes 2 minutes or less, you eliminate the psychological barriers that typically prevent action. This isn't just about exercise. Want to write a book? Commit to writing 1 sentence. Want to learn a language? Commit to 1 phrase. Want to meditate? Commit to 1 breath. The goal isn't to do only the minimum. It's to make starting so easy that you can't say no. The real magic happens after you start. Once you're in motion, the same psychological principles that made starting difficult begin working in your favor. Your brain's natural completion bias, the desire to finish what you've started, kicks in. Suddenly doing more doesn't feel like a burden. It feels natural. But here's the crucial part. You must give yourself permission to stop after 2 minutes. This isn't a trick where you secretly plan to do more. If you do that, your brain will catch on and start resisting again. The 2-minute commitment must be genuine. Anything beyond that is a bonus, not an expectation. This approach also builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to accomplish tasks. Each time you follow through on your 2-minute commitment, you're proving to yourself that you can be trusted with commitments. This creates a positive feedback loop, making future commitments easier to keep. Chapter 6: The Identity Revolution. Every morning you look in the mirror and see someone who should be more disciplined. You tell yourself you need to try harder, do better, be stronger. But what if the problem isn't your actions? It's the story you're telling yourself about who you are. Think about the last time you tried to force yourself to do something that felt completely against your nature. Maybe it was waking up at 5 a.m. when you've always considered yourself a night person, or sticking to a diet when you've always thought of yourself as someone with no willpower. How did that work out? The truth is, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. This isn't just motivational talk. It's backed by neuroscience. Research in neuroplasticity shows that our brains physically reshape themselves based on our self-perception. When you repeatedly think, "I'm not a morning person," you're not just describing yourself. You're programming your neural pathways to resist early rising. Muhammad Ali's transformation from Cassius Clay to the greatest represents one of the most powerful examples of identity-based change in history. Long before he won his first heavyweight championship, Ali declared himself the greatest boxer of all time. Many thought it was mere braggadocio, but Ali understood something profound about human psychology. "I am the greatest," he would say. "I said that even before I knew I was." This wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a deliberate reprogramming of his identity. Ali didn't just train his body, he trained his self-image. Every morning, he would look in the mirror and reinforce this identity. His legendary discipline and training wasn't the result of superior willpower. It was the natural expression of who he believed himself to be. The brilliance of Ali's approach wasn't just in positive thinking. It was an understanding that our actions naturally align with our identity. When you truly believe you're the greatest, training becomes inevitable rather than optional. You don't need motivation to act like who you are. This principle extends far beyond boxing. Consider how different tasks feel when they align with your identity versus when they don't. A person who identifies as a reader doesn't need willpower to pick up a book. It's just what they do. Someone who sees themselves as an athlete doesn't struggle to go to the gym. It's part of who they are. The key to lasting discipline isn't in changing your actions, it's in changing your self-image. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to change their identity through results. Once I lose weight, I'll be a fit person, when it actually works the other way around. Your identity shapes your results, not vice versa. Mia, a teacher who had always dreamed of becoming a musician, struggled for years with consistent practice. She would set practice goals, download habit-tracking apps, and try to force herself to practice guitar daily. But nothing stuck, until she realized she was approaching it backward. Instead of trying to practice more, Mia began consciously shifting her identity. She started small, simply telling herself each morning, "I am a musician." She joined online music communities, started dressing more like the musicians she admired, and reorganized her living space to put her guitar in the center of her room. At first, it felt like pretending, but gradually, something shifted. She noticed herself naturally reaching for her guitar during breaks instead of her phone. She found herself thinking about music theory while commuting. Practice wasn't something she had to force anymore. It was simply what musicians do, and she was a musician. Chapter 7. The Environment Advantage. You're staring at your phone again, even though you promised yourself you'd focus on that important project. The notification light blinks, and before you know it, another hour has slipped away. Don't blame yourself. Your environment is setting you up for failure. Think about it. How many times have you tried to resist temptation through sheer willpower, only to give in eventually? The cookie jar on your desk, the TV remote within arm's reach, the phone constantly buzzing with notifications. Your surroundings are designed to make discipline impossible. The truth about willpower is both liberating and uncomfortable. It's largely a myth. Research shows that environmental factors influence our behavior far more than personal resolve. Your brain is wired to take the path of least resistance. It's not a character flaw, it's human nature. Steve Jobs understood this principle at a profound level. His iconic black turtleneck wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a deliberate environmental hack. By wearing the same outfit daily, he eliminated decision fatigue from his morning routine. His workspace at Apple was famously minimalist, containing only what was absolutely necessary. Even his home was sparsely furnished, not because he couldn't afford luxury, but because he understood that simplicity breeds focus. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things, Jobs often said. But what's less known is how he structured his environment to make those no's automatic. He didn't rely on willpower to avoid distractions. He eliminated them entirely. In meetings, he banned PowerPoint presentations, knowing they often served as a crutch for unclear thinking. He designed Apple's offices with central bathrooms and common areas, forcing employees to cross paths and spark unexpected collaborations. The genius of Jobs' approach wasn't in having more discipline than others. It was in recognizing that discipline becomes effortless when your environment supports your goals. He didn't try to become more focused. He created an environment where focus was the default state. This principle extends far beyond the workplace. Every aspect of your life is influenced by your environment, whether you realize it or not. The foods you eat, the habits you form, the work you accomplish, all are dramatically affected by your surroundings. Look at this. Studies show that people eat 22% more when using larger plates. They watch 58% more TV when a television is in their bedroom. They're 2.7 times more likely to buy junk food when it's at eye level in the store. None of these behaviors require conscious decision-making. They're automatic responses to environmental cues. But here's the good news. Once you understand this principle, you can use it to your advantage. Instead of fighting against your environment, you can design it to make success automatic. Jake, a college student struggling with procrastination, discovered this the hard way. Every night, he'd promise himself he'd study more the next day. But every day, he'd find himself scrolling through social media instead of opening his textbooks. The turning point came when Jake realized he was trying to solve the wrong problem. Instead of attempting to build more willpower, he restructured his study environment. He moved his desk to face away from his bed, eliminating the temptation to lie down. He installed website blockers on his laptop and left his phone in another room while studying. He even pre-packed his study materials each night, removing any friction from getting started the next day. The results were immediate and dramatic. Without his usual distractions within reach, studying became the path of least resistance. His grades improved not because he became more disciplined, but because he made success easier than failure. This approach works because it aligns with your brain's natural tendencies rather than fighting against them. Think of your environment as a river's current. Swimming upstream requires constant effort and eventually exhausts you. But adjust the flow of the river, and suddenly you're being carried toward your destination effortlessly. Here's how to apply this principle to any area of your life. First, identify the behaviors you want to change. But instead of focusing on willpower, analyze your environment. What makes the wrong choice easy? What makes the right choice hard? For fitness goals, this might mean laying out your workout clothes the night before and keeping your gym bag by the door. For healthy eating, it could mean reorganizing your kitchen so junk food is out of sight and nutritious options are easily accessible. For productivity, it might mean creating a dedicated workspace free from distractions. The key is to make good habits convenient and bad habits inconvenient. Want to read more? Keep a book on your pillow and your TV remote in a drawer. Want to save money? Remove shopping apps from your phone and set up automatic transfers to your savings account. Want to wake up earlier? Put your alarm clock across the room and lay out your morning coffee supplies before bed. Remember, your environment will always win against willpower. Instead of trying to be stronger, make your surroundings work for you rather than against you. Your environment is either supporting your goals or sabotaging them. There is no neutral ground. Every object in your space, every notification on your phone, every item in your kitchen is either making success easier or harder. Think about the goals you're currently struggling with. What aspects of your environment are working against you? What small changes could make success the default option? Remember, discipline isn't about having ironclad willpower. It's about creating an environment where you don't need willpower at all. When your surroundings support your goals, success becomes inevitable. For the next week, choose one area of your life where you want to build better habits. Instead of focusing on motivation or willpower, change your environment to make the right choice the easy choice. Remove one major temptation and add one element that makes success more convenient. Your environment will do the heavy lifting. You just have to show up. Chapter 8. The Habit Loop Advantage. You've probably experienced this before, sitting down to work, only to find yourself mindlessly scrolling through social media without even remembering how you got there, or reaching for that afternoon snack at exactly 3 p.m., even when you're not hungry. These aren't conscious decisions. They're habit loops running on autopilot. Every habit in your life, good or bad, follows the same pattern. Something triggers you, cue. You perform an action, routine, and you receive some kind of reward. This isn't just theory. It's how your brain is wired to operate. Understanding this pattern is the key to making discipline automatic. Charles Duhigg, through his groundbreaking research documented in The Power of Habit, uncovered this fundamental truth about human behavior. While studying at MIT, he discovered that about 40% of our daily actions aren't decisions at all, they're habits. The real breakthrough came when he realized that these habits follow an unchanging neurological pattern, the habit loop. His research revealed how major organizations use this knowledge to transform behaviors. For instance, when Procter & Gamble wanted to sell Febreze, they initially failed because they focused on eliminating bad smells, a cue that people had become nose blind to. When they changed the routine to make Febreze the final reward of cleaning, a fresh scent to celebrate a job well done, sales skyrocketed. They didn't change the product. They simply plugged it into the right habit loop. But this principle extends far beyond marketing. Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps's coach, Bob Bowman, used habit loops to build what he called the invisible advantage. Every day, Phelps went through the exact same routine: wake up, eat the same breakfast, listen to the same music, perform the same stretches. These weren't just random routines. They were carefully designed habit loops that made excellence automatic. Bowman understood that willpower isn't reliable, but habits are. By creating specific cues, like putting on headphones, that triggered specific routines, like visualization exercises, followed by specific rewards, like the satisfaction of perfect form, he helped Phelps develop unconscious patterns of success. When race day came, Phelps wasn't relying on motivation. He was running on autopilot. The same principle applies to any area where you want to build discipline. Take Lisa, a marketing executive who struggled with morning procrastination. Every day she'd wake up to her phone alarm, cue, check social media, routine, and get a quick dopamine hit, reward. This habit loop was sabotaging her productivity. Instead of trying to force herself to be more disciplined, Lisa redesigned her habit loop. She bought an analog alarm clock and placed it across the room, new cue, which forced her to get up and walk, new routine. Once up, she'd make her favorite coffee and enjoy it on her balcony, reward. Within weeks, her morning productivity soared, not because she tried harder, but because she built a better loop. This is the secret to effortless discipline. You don't need more willpower, you need better systems. Your current habits aren't your fault. They're just loops that were built either by accident or design. But once you understand how these loops work, you can reprogram them to serve your goals. Here's how to build your own effortless discipline loop. First, identify the cue that triggers your current behavior. Is it time of day, location, emotional state, physical sensation? The cue is like a button that your brain automatically responds to. Next, design a new routine that you want to become automatic. The key is to make this routine specific and achievable. Instead of exercise more, your routine might be put on running shoes and step outside. Finally, attach a reward that your brain genuinely enjoys. This is crucial. The reward must be immediate and satisfying enough to make your brain want to repeat the loop. Your challenge for the next week. Pick one area where you want more discipline. Identify the current cue that triggers an unproductive routine. Keep the cue, but design a new routine and attach a specific immediate reward. Follow this loop every day for 7 days, no matter how small it seems. Remember, you're not trying to overhaul your life overnight. You're building an automatic pattern that will make discipline effortless. Chapter 9. Systems Beat Motivation. You're lying in bed, alarm blaring, debating whether to hit snooze or stick to your morning workout routine. In that moment, motivation isn't going to save you, but a system will. The difference between those who consistently achieve their goals and those who don't isn't willpower or inspiration. It's having a framework that works even when they don't feel like it. Think about your bank account for a moment. If you relied solely on motivation to save money, you'd probably spend it all. But when you set up automatic transfers to your savings account, it happens whether you feel like saving or not. This same principle applies to every area of discipline. Jerry Seinfeld's journey to comedy success wasn't built on waiting for inspiration to strike. Instead, he developed what became known as the "don't break the chain" method. Every day he wrote jokes. He would mark an X on his calendar. Soon, the growing chain of X's became more motivating than any internal drive could be. The system itself created the momentum. "I told myself I wasn't going to break this chain," Seinfeld later revealed in an interview. Once you start getting a few days under your belt, you'll find some way to write every day. The beauty of his system wasn't just its simplicity. It was how it transformed a creative pursuit into a mechanical process. He didn't need to feel creative. He just needed to not break the chain. This approach revolutionized not just his comedy career, but influenced countless other successful people. The power lies in its ability to bypass the unreliable nature of motivation entirely. When you have a visible record of your progress, the desire to maintain the streak becomes stronger than any temporary discomfort or resistance. Think about how often you've started something with incredible enthusiasm, only to watch that initial surge of motivation fade. Maybe it was a new workout routine, a business idea, or a creative project. The pattern is always the same. High motivation leads to action, but when motivation dips, as it inevitably will, the action stops. But what if you could make your success independent of how you feel? That's exactly what a no motivation system does. It's like installing guardrails on your behavior. No matter how you feel, the system keeps you on track. Take Ben, a marketing professional who dreamed of starting his own business. For months, he waited for the perfect moment to begin, telling himself he needed to feel more ready, more inspired, more motivated. But that moment never came. Finally, Ben realized he needed a system, not more motivation. He committed to posting one piece of content online every day, no matter what. He set up a simple tracking system, a wall calendar, where he marked each day he posted with a big red X. He also joined an accountability group where members had to share their daily content. Missing a day meant paying $50 to the group pool. The first week was challenging. Some days he didn't feel creative. Some days work was overwhelming. But the system didn't care about his excuses. It only cared about whether he posted or not. The growing chain of X's on his calendar and the prospect of losing money became more powerful than any temporary resistance. Within 3 months, Ben had built a significant online following, not because he was more motivated than others, but because his system made consistency inevitable. The quality of his content improved naturally through daily practice, and more importantly, his identity shifted from someone who wanted to start a business to someone who shows up every day, no matter what. This is the power of systems over motivation. When you build the right framework, discipline becomes automatic. Here's how to create your own no motivation system. First, identify your key behavior, the one action that, if done consistently, would lead to your desired outcome. For fitness, it might be showing up at the gym. For business, it might be making one sales call. For writing, it might be producing 500 words. The key is to make it specific and measurable. Next, add external accountability. This could be a financial stake, like Ben's $50 penalty, a public commitment, announcing your goal on social media, an accountability partner, someone who checks in daily, a coach or mentor who holds you responsible. Then create tracking mechanisms that make your progress visible. The chain method works well, but you could also use a habit tracking app, a public spreadsheet, daily check-ins with an accountability group, progress photos or metrics. Finally, automate as much as possible. Set calendar reminders. Prepare everything the night before. Remove decisions from the equation. Create environmental triggers that prompt action. Remember, the goal isn't to rely on perfect execution, it's to make the right action the path of least resistance. When Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps trained, his coach Bob Bowman didn't leave anything to chance. Every day followed the same sequence, same warm-up, same visualization routine, same cool down. The system was so ingrained that by the time Phelps reached the Olympics, excellence was his default setting. This principle extends beyond sports. Look at any consistently successful person, and you'll find systems behind their achievements. Stephen King writes every morning at the same time, in the same place. Warren Buffett follows a strict investment framework rather than making emotional decisions. These aren't just habits. They're carefully designed systems that remove the need for motivation. The beauty of a well-designed system is that it creates its own momentum. Once you've got a streak going, the thought of breaking it becomes more painful than the effort required to maintain it. It's like a flywheel. Hard to get moving at first, but once it's spinning, it wants to keep spinning. Your challenge for the next week: choose one goal and build a complete no-motivation system around it. Include all three elements: external accountability, who will hold you responsible; visible tracking, how will you monitor your streak; automation, what can you set up to make action inevitable. Don't focus on making it perfect, focus on making it automatic. Because when you have the right system in place, discipline isn't about feeling motivated, it's about following the framework you've built. Remember, systems beat motivation every time. The most successful people don't have more willpower than you. They just have better systems. Chapter 10. Emotional Alchemy. Turning Fear into Fuel. You're standing at the edge of your comfort zone, heart racing, palms sweaty. That presentation you need to give, the business you want to start, the conversation you've been avoiding. It all feels overwhelming. Your instinct screams to retreat, to stay safe, to avoid these uncomfortable emotions. But what if these very feelings weren't warning signs to stop, but rather signals pointing toward your next breakthrough? Most people spend their lives running from discomfort. They see fear as a red light, frustration as failure, and self-doubt as proof they're not ready. But here's the truth. These emotions aren't your enemies. They're untapped sources of power waiting to be channeled. Think about it. Every time you've grown significantly in your life, it wasn't during moments of comfort. It was when you pushed through fear, when you persisted despite frustration, when you acted in spite of doubt. Those emotions weren't obstacles. They were the fuel that powered your transformation. Michael Jordan's journey exemplifies this principle perfectly. Early in his career, he was cut from his high school basketball team, a moment that would have crushed many people's spirits. Instead of letting this rejection defeat him, Jordan used it as rocket fuel for his ambition. Whenever I was working out and got tired and figured I ought to stop, I'd close my eyes and see that list in the locker room without my name on it, Jordan later revealed. That usually got me going again. He didn't just overcome his frustration. He alchemized it into motivation that drove him to become the greatest basketball player of all time. This wasn't just about talent or determination. Jordan mastered what psychologists call emotional transmutation, the ability to convert negative emotions into productive energy. When others doubted him, he didn't waste energy trying to prove them wrong directly. Instead, he channeled that emotion into his training, turning each criticism into extra hours in the gym, additional shots practiced, more intense workouts. The science behind this is fascinating. Research shows that fear, frustration, and anxiety create an arousal state in your body that's nearly identical to excitement. The only difference? The story you tell yourself about what those sensations mean. This is why Olympic athletes often perform better under pressure. They've learned to interpret their racing heart and sweaty palms not as anxiety, but as their body preparing for peak performance. They've mastered emotional alchemy. Think about your own life. How often have you let fear stop you from taking action? How many times has frustration made you quit just before a breakthrough? How frequently has self-doubt convinced you to play it safe? Now imagine if you could harness these emotions instead of being controlled by them. Imagine if every time fear arose, you saw it as a compass pointing toward growth. What if frustration became your signal that you're on the verge of a breakthrough? What if self-doubt transformed into proof that you're pushing your boundaries? Observe Olivia, a marketing executive who dreamed of starting her own agency. For months, fear of failure kept her stuck in her corporate job. Every time she thought about making the leap, her mind flooded with worst-case scenarios. What if she couldn't find clients? What if she went broke? What if she embarrassed herself? But instead of letting these fears paralyze her, Olivia learned to use them as fuel. She started keeping a fear journal, where she wrote down every scary thought that crossed her mind. Then, beside each fear, she wrote an action step she could take to address it. Fear of no clients? She started networking while still employed. Fear of going broke? She built up 6 months of savings. Fear of embarrassment? She reminded herself that the real embarrassment would be never trying at all. Within 6 months, she had transformed her fears into a comprehensive business plan. Each worry became a problem to solve rather than a reason to quit. Today, her agency is thriving, not because she eliminated fear, but because she learned to use it as fuel for action. The key to emotional alchemy lies in understanding 3 fundamental principles. Emotions are energy, neither good nor bad until you assign them meaning. What you resist persists. Trying to fight negative emotions only makes them stronger. Direction is more important than suppression. The goal isn't to eliminate emotions, but to redirect them. Here's how to practice emotional alchemy in your own life. When fear arises, instead of asking, "What if I fail?" ask, "What if I succeed?" Write down exactly what you're afraid of. Then create an action plan for each fear. Remind yourself that fear and excitement are physiologically identical. It's all about interpretation. When frustration hits, see it as a sign you're pushing your limits. Frustration means growth is imminent. Break down what's frustrating you into smaller, manageable challenges. Use the energy of frustration to fuel focused problem solving. When self-doubt creeps in, remember that doubt means you care. You wouldn't doubt yourself if it wasn't important. List your past achievements to remind yourself of your capability. Take one small action that proves your doubts wrong. The most powerful tool in emotional alchemy is the energy redirect. When you feel a strong negative emotion, don't try to suppress it. Instead, ask yourself, how can I use this energy productively? This is exactly what Serena Williams does with pre-match nerves. Instead of trying to calm down, she channels that nervous energy into hyper-focused preparation. The same jitters that might paralyze others become part of her winning routine. Remember, the goal isn't to feel less, but to use what you feel more effectively. Every emotion can become fuel if you learn to direct it properly. Chapter 11. The Joy of Hard Things. You've been taught that success requires sacrifice, that discipline means suffering through things you hate. Each morning, you drag yourself out of bed, force yourself to exercise, or push through work you dread, all while wondering why it has to feel so hard. But what if the struggle isn't coming from the tasks themselves, but from your relationship with them? The most successful people in the world don't just tolerate difficult things, they fall in love with them. They don't endure the process, they embrace it. This isn't because they're wired differently than you. It's because they've discovered something most people never realize. Discipline doesn't have to feel like punishment. When Kobe Bryant woke up at 4 a.m. to train, he wasn't suffering through it. He was savoring it. While other players dreaded extra practice, Kobe found genuine joy in the burn of his muscles, the squeak of his shoes on an empty court, the satisfaction of perfecting a move while others slept. He called these early morning sessions his breakfast club, transforming what most would consider torture into something he looked forward to. "I love the training," Kobe once said. "I love the work because I knew the results would come." This wasn't just positive thinking. It was a complete reframing of what hard work meant. Where others saw sacrifice, he saw opportunity. Where they felt pain, he felt progress. This shift in perspective didn't just make him more disciplined, it made him unstoppable. Because when you learn to love the hard things, you gain an advantage that motivation can't match and willpower can't touch. You create a perpetual engine of progress that doesn't require forcing or fighting yourself. The science behind this is fascinating. Study in neuroplasticity shows that your brain can be rewired to associate traditionally difficult tasks with pleasure instead of pain. It's not about pretending things aren't challenging. It's about changing your relationship with challenge itself. Think about a time you mastered something difficult. Maybe it was learning an instrument, picking up a sport, or building a skill. At first, it felt impossible, but as you improved, the challenge became exciting rather than daunting. The same process that once frustrated you became deeply satisfying. This is the key to making discipline effortless. Learning to find joy in the journey, not just the destination. When you can do this, you tap into a source of motivation that never runs dry. Tom, an advertising executive who always hated running, discovered this principle by accident. For years, he forced himself to jog, seeing it as a necessary evil for staying healthy. Every step felt like punishment, and eventually he always quit. But then he tried something different. Instead of focusing on how hard running felt, he started paying attention to what it gave him. He noticed how each run cleared his mind, how his body felt stronger after pushing through fatigue, how the discomfort itself became a signal of growth. He began celebrating small wins, not just distance or speed, but the fact that he showed up, that he pushed through one more minute, that he felt his endurance building. He started calling his morning runs his mental clarity sessions, reframing them from something he had to endure into something that empowered him. Within months, something shifted. Running wasn't just tolerable, it became something he craved. The burn in his legs, the rhythm of his breathing, the early morning solitude, these became rewards rather than punishments. He didn't need willpower anymore because he genuinely wanted to run. This transformation is available to you in any area of life. Whether it's waking up early, working on your business, or tackling difficult projects, you can learn to love the challenge. Here's how. First, stop seeing discipline as sacrifice. Every time you think "I have to," replace it with "I get to." This isn't just positive thinking, it's acknowledging the privilege of being able to work towards something meaningful. Second, Find the hidden pleasures in difficult tasks. Maybe it's the peace of early morning silence, the satisfaction of solving problems, or the pride of doing what others won't. There's always something to appreciate if you look closely enough. Third, celebrate the process, not just the outcome. Don't wait to feel good until you reach your goal. Find satisfaction in the work itself, in showing up, in pushing through, in getting a little better each day. This isn't about pretending things aren't hard. It's about understanding that hard things can also be deeply rewarding. When you make this shift, discipline stops being something you force and becomes something you choose. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate difficulty, it's to fall in love with it. Because when you learn to enjoy the hard things, success becomes inevitable. Challenge: pick one habit that feels hard. For the next 5 days, reframe it. Instead of focusing on the struggle, focus on what it's giving you: strength, progress, growth. Chapter 12: The Non-Negotiable Mind. Every morning there's a war inside your head. Should I hit snooze or get up? Should I work out or skip today? The second you allow this internal debate, you've already lost. You might think you're being reasonable, weighing your options, but in reality, you're opening the door to failure. Think about the last time you planned to do something important. Maybe it was working out, writing, or tackling a crucial project. The moment you started questioning whether you felt like it, or if you really needed to do it today, you gave your brain permission to negotiate. And your brain, being the masterful deal maker it is, probably convinced you to take the easier path. This internal negotiation is exhausting. It drains your mental energy, creates unnecessary stress, and worst of all, it undermines your discipline. Every time you entertain an excuse, you reinforce the belief that your commitments are optional. The most disciplined people in the world understand something crucial. They don't argue with themselves. They execute without question. This isn't about being rigid or inflexible. It's about removing the mental friction that keeps most people stuck. See how Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL commander and best-selling author, approaches his 4:30 a.m. wake-up time. He doesn't lie in bed contemplating whether he needs more sleep. He doesn't check the weather to decide if it's a good day for training. When the alarm sounds, he moves. No questions asked. If you want to be successful, you have to be willing to do what others aren't, Willink often says. But it's not just about doing hard things. It's about removing the option not to do them. By making his early morning routine non-negotiable, he eliminates the energy drain of deciding. The alarm rings, and he's up. It's that simple. This approach might seem extreme, but it actually makes discipline easier. When something is truly non-negotiable, you don't waste mental energy debating it. You don't experience the stress of uncertainty. You just act. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up each morning and debate whether you feel like maintaining dental hygiene. You don't negotiate with yourself about skipping a day. It's simply what you do. This is the power of making something non-negotiable. It becomes as automatic as personal hygiene. The science behind this is fascinating. Study in decision fatigue shows that every choice you make depletes your mental energy. When you allow internal debates about your commitments, you're not just risking failure, you're actively wearing down your willpower. By making certain actions non-negotiable, you conserve this mental energy for more important decisions. This principle transformed Maria's approach to her writing career. For years, she struggled with consistency, always debating whether she was in the mood to write. Some days she'd produce pages, other days she'd convince herself she needed more inspiration. This inconsistency wasn't just affecting her output, it was destroying her confidence. Then she implemented the no negotiation rule. Writing would happen at 6 a.m. every day, no matter what. No internal debates about feeling inspired. No questions about whether she had enough sleep. No negotiations about waiting until later. The first week was hard. Her brain tried every trick to maintain the old pattern of negotiation. But she held firm. 6 a.m. meant writing, period. By the second week, something shifted. The mental argument disappeared. When 6 a.m. came, she wrote. Not because she forced herself, but because it was simply what happened at that time. Within a month, she had written more than in the previous 3 months combined. But more importantly, she had eliminated the exhausting mental battle that used to drain her energy every morning. This transformation is available to you in any area of life. Whether it's exercise, meditation, work, or personal development, making actions non-negotiable can revolutionize your results. Here's how to implement this principle. First, identify your non-negotiables. These should be the cornerstone habits that drive your success. Don't try to make everything non-negotiable. Focus on the vital few actions that matter most. Next, remove all wiggle room. Set specific times, places, and conditions for these actions. The more precise you are, the less room your brain has to negotiate. I'll work out sometime today leaves room for debate. I train at 7 a.m. Monday through Friday doesn't. Finally, develop a non-negotiable identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who tries to work out regularly, become someone who trains at 7 a.m., period. This identity shift makes compliance automatic because you're no longer deciding what to do. You're simply being who you are. Remember, the goal isn't to become inflexible. It's to remove the energy-draining internal debates that keep you from your best life. When you make important actions non-negotiable, you free up mental energy for the decisions that truly matter. Think about Navy SEALs again. When they receive a mission, they don't debate whether they feel like executing it. They don't negotiate with themselves about the difficulty or discomfort. They move. This same principle can transform your life. This doesn't mean you'll never miss a day or face legitimate reasons to adjust. But it does mean you'll stop entertaining the daily excuses that keep most people stuck. No more, I'll do it tomorrow. No more, I'm not feeling it today. No more negotiations with yourself about what you've already committed to doing. Challenge. Pick one crucial habit and make it completely non-negotiable for the next 7 days. No debates, no excuses, just action. Write down exactly when and where it will happen, then execute without question. Your brain will try to negotiate. Don't let it. Chapter 13. The Bounce Back Blueprint. You were crushing it. Early mornings, consistent workouts, peak productivity. Everything was finally clicking into place. Then life threw you a curveball. Maybe it was illness, travel, or an unexpected crisis. Now you're stuck in that familiar spiral of guilt and hesitation, wondering if all your progress is lost. Each day that passes makes it harder to restart, and that voice in your head keeps whispering, "Why bother? You've already failed." But here's what most people get wrong about setbacks. They're not failures. They're feedback. The real measure of discipline isn't in never falling. It's in how quickly you get back up. Think about it. Every single high achiever you admire has faced setbacks. The difference? They don't let temporary pauses become permanent stops. They understand something crucial that most people miss. Momentum isn't as fragile as you think. Serena Williams, arguably the greatest tennis player of all time, faced a potentially career-ending foot injury in 2011. She had multiple surgeries and dropped to world ranking number 175. Most athletes would have seen this as the beginning of the end. Instead, Serena saw it as a pause, not a stop. During recovery, she adapted her training, focusing on what she could do rather than what she couldn't. She worked on her mental game, studied matches, and maintained the habits she could control. When she returned to competition, she didn't just recover. She dominated, eventually reclaiming the number 1 ranking and winning multiple Grand Slams. I really think a champion is defined not by their wins, Serena often says, but by how they can recover when they fall. This mindset shift is everything. Instead of seeing setbacks as evidence of failure, she saw them as opportunities to prove her resilience. The science behind momentum is fascinating. Study shows that progress isn't linear. It's more like compound interest. Small actions build upon each other, creating a foundation that doesn't disappear just because you miss a few days. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. If you take a break for a week, you don't forget how to ride. The skill remains. You just need to shake off the rust. Sam knew this feeling all too well. After 6 months of consistent 5 a.m. workouts, a 2-week vacation completely derailed his routine. The first missed workout led to another, then another. Soon he was convinced he'd lost all his progress and would have to start from scratch. But instead of letting this setback define him, Sam tried something different. He implemented the never miss twice rule, allowing himself one missed day, but committing to showing up the next, no matter what. He stopped trying to jump back in at 100% and focused on simply maintaining the pattern. The first day back was rough. His performance wasn't where it had been, and that perfectionist voice in his head tried to convince him it wasn't worth it. But Sam stuck to his rule. He wasn't aiming for perfect, just present. Within a week, he was back in full swing, and within 2 weeks, it was like he'd never stopped. This is the power of the bounce-back blueprint. It's not about avoiding setbacks. It's about having a system to recover quickly when they inevitably happen. Here's how to implement it in your own life. First, drop the perfectionist mindset. Progress isn't binary. Missing one workout doesn't erase your fitness gains. Sleeping in once doesn't make you lazy. The moment you stop seeing setbacks as total failures, you remove their power to derail you completely. Next, focus on momentum, not magnitude. Don't try to make up for lost time by doubling your efforts. This usually leads to burnout and another setback. Instead, focus on small actions that rebuild your rhythm. If you've missed a week of workouts, don't try to do a 3-hour session your first day back. Start with 15 minutes. Let momentum build naturally. Finally, create a fallback routine, a minimum viable habit that maintains your progress even when life gets chaotic. This might be a 10-minute workout instead of your usual hour, or writing 1 paragraph instead of your normal 5 pages. The goal isn't to advance during these times. It's to maintain the habit pattern until you can resume full intensity. Challenge. Think about your last setback. Instead of trying to prevent the next one, create your bounce-back blueprint. Write down your minimum viable habit, the smallest version of your routine that you can maintain no matter what. The next time life throws you off course, you'll know exactly how to get back on track. Chapter 14. The Power of 1%. You're staring at that person who seems to have it all together, the one who's crushing their goals while you feel stuck in place. Your mind automatically assumes they must have some secret advantage, some extraordinary talent or superhuman discipline. But what if the gap between where you are and where they are isn't as wide as you think? The truth is, most overnight successes are built through tiny, almost invisible improvements made consistently over time. While you're waiting for the perfect moment to make a massive change, others are quietly getting 1% better every single day. Think about compound interest in finance. A small percentage gain, reinvested consistently, creates exponential growth over time. The same principle applies to personal growth and discipline. If you improve by just 1% each day, you'll be 37 times better by the end of the year. This isn't just theory, it's mathematical reality. The British cycling team's transformation under Dave Brailsford perfectly illustrates this principle. Before Brailsford took over as performance director, British cycling had won only 1 Olympic gold medal in its 76-year history. Instead of promising dramatic improvements, Brailsford introduced the concept of marginal gains, seeking 1% improvements in everything they did. His team redesigned bike seats to be slightly more comfortable, tested different fabrics in wind tunnels to reduce drag by fractions of a second, and even discovered that certain types of massage gel helped muscles recover a tiny bit faster. They painted the inside of their truck white to spot dust that could degrade bike maintenance. They tested different pillows and mattresses to improve athletes' sleep by mere minutes. Each change was so small it seemed almost insignificant. But together, these tiny improvements created a revolution. Within 5 years, British cyclists dominated the Olympics, winning 60% of the available gold medals. They went on to win the Tour de France 5 times in 6 years, something no British cyclist had ever done before. The power of this approach lies in its sustainability. While others burn out trying to make dramatic changes, small improvements feel effortless. You don't need motivation when you're only trying to get 1% better. You just need to show up. This isn't just about sports or business. It's about any area of life where you want to improve. Observe Jake, a coder who dreamed of writing a novel. Every January, he'd make grand plans to write thousands of words daily, only to quit within weeks when life got busy. This time, he tried something different. Instead of setting an ambitious daily word count, Jake committed to writing just 100 words each day, about half a page. Some days he wrote more when inspiration struck, but he never pressured himself beyond that minimal goal. The first week felt almost too easy, like he wasn't doing enough, but he stuck with it. After a month, those 100-word sessions had become automatic. He no longer needed to force himself to write. It was just part of his routine, like brushing his teeth. 3 months in, he had over 15,000 words. More importantly, he had built a sustainable writing habit that didn't depend on motivation or willpower. By the end of the year, Jake had completed his first novel. Not through heroic writing sessions or sacrificing sleep, but through tiny, consistent actions that added up over time. The 1% rule works because it bypasses your brain's resistance to change. When you try to make dramatic improvements, your mind perceives danger and activates its defense mechanisms. But small changes fly under the radar. They don't trigger fear or resistance because they feel manageable. Here's how to apply this principle in your own life. First, break down your goals into their smallest components. Want to get fit? Don't start with hour-long workouts. Begin with 1 push-up per day, then add 1 more each week. Want to meditate? Start with 1 minute daily. Want to eat better? Replace one processed food with a whole food alternative. Next, focus on consistency over intensity. It's better to do something small every day than something big once in a while. The power lies in the repetition, not the magnitude of the change. Finally, track your progress. Small improvements are hard to notice in the moment, but when you look back over weeks or months, the compound effect becomes clear. Keep a simple log of your daily actions, not to judge yourself, but to prove that tiny changes add up to massive transformation. Challenge. Choose one area of your life where you want to improve. Identify the smallest possible action you could take. Something so easy it feels almost ridiculous. Commit to doing just that one thing every day for the next week. Remember, you're not aiming for dramatic change. You're building the foundation for lasting transformation through tiny, consistent improvements. Chapter 15. Making discipline your default setting. You've mastered the hacks, learned the tricks, and experienced moments of incredible discipline. But something still nags at you. Will this last? You worry that one day, all these tools and techniques might fade away, leaving you back where you started. This fear isn't unfounded. Most people cycle between periods of discipline and regression, never quite making success their natural state. But what if discipline wasn't something you had to maintain? What if it was simply who you are? The difference between temporary improvement and permanent transformation lies in identity. When discipline becomes your default setting, when it's woven into the fabric of who you are, you no longer need tricks or hacks. Success becomes inevitable because anything else feels wrong. Think about breathing. You don't need motivation to breathe. You don't have to trick yourself into it. You don't need accountability partners or tracking systems. You just breathe because that's what your body does. This is what happens when discipline becomes your identity. It's no longer a choice or a struggle. It's simply what you do. Tom Brady's journey to becoming the most decorated quarterback in NFL history perfectly illustrates this principle. When Brady was drafted 199th overall in the 2000 NFL Draft, 6 other quarterbacks were chosen before him. Most players would have seen this as a setback, but Brady saw it as fuel for transformation. He didn't just adopt disciplined habits. He became discipline personified. Brady's commitment went far beyond normal professional standards. He transformed every aspect of his life to support peak performance. His diet became legendary. No sugar, no white flour, no nightshade vegetables. He went to bed at 8:30 p.m. every night, regardless of what he might be missing out on. He studied film obsessively, trained relentlessly, and maintained this level of discipline even after winning multiple Super Bowls. What's remarkable isn't just what Brady did. It's how natural it became for him. He didn't force himself to follow these strict routines. They were simply an expression of who he was. When asked about his extreme lifestyle, Brady often seemed puzzled by the question. To him, this wasn't extreme. It was just life. This is the level of identity-based discipline you're aiming for. Not something you do, but something you are. The transformation begins with your environment. Your surroundings shape your behavior more than willpower ever could. When you structure your environment to support your identity, discipline becomes automatic. This means a physical environment. Your space should reflect your identity. If you're a writer, your desk should be ready for writing at all times. If you're an athlete, your workout gear should be visible and accessible. Remove anything that contradicts your identity. The junk food, the distracting devices, the symbols of your old self. Social environment. The people around you shape who you become. Surround yourself with individuals who embody the discipline you want to achieve. Join communities where your desired behavior is the norm. When discipline is the default in your social circle, it becomes your default too. Mental environment. Your thoughts create your reality. Start speaking and thinking in alignment with your new identity. Instead of, I should work out, think, I am someone who prioritizes health. Instead of, I need to focus, think, I am focused. Consider Emma, a former procrastinator who transformed her life through identity-based discipline. Emma used to rely on motivation and willpower, leading to cycles of progress and regression. But everything changed when she stopped trying to be disciplined and started being a disciplined person. Instead of forcing herself to wake up early, she became someone who naturally rises with the sun. Instead of struggling to stay focused at work, she became someone who automatically enters flow state. Instead of battling with workout motivation, she became someone who feels off without daily movement. The key to Emma's transformation wasn't finding better hacks. It was changing her self-image. She stopped seeing discipline as something external to master and started seeing it as a natural expression of who she was. To make this shift permanent, you need to understand the 3 levels of identity reinforcement. Daily actions. Every action is a vote for who you want to become. When you take disciplined action, you're not just doing something. You're reinforcing your identity as a disciplined person. Each workout, each focused work session, each healthy meal is evidence that supports your new self-image. Environmental design. Your environment should make discipline the path of least resistance. This goes beyond just removing temptations. It's about creating spaces and systems that naturally guide you toward disciplined behavior. When your environment aligns with your identity, you don't have to force yourself to stay on track. Identity statements. The stories you tell yourself shape who you become. Replace limiting narratives, "I'm not a morning person," with empowering truths. "I choose to rise early because that's who I am." These aren't affirmations. They're declarations of identity backed by consistent action. The power of this approach lies in its permanence. When discipline becomes your identity, you don't need motivation or willpower. You don't struggle with decisions because there's no decision to make. You simply act in alignment with who you are. This transformation isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. Even highly disciplined people have off days. The difference is that they see these moments as temporary deviations from their true identity, not evidence of failure. When you know who you are, getting back on track isn't a struggle. It's a natural return to your default state. Think about who you want to become. Not what you want to achieve or what habits you want to build, but who you want to be. The achievements and habits will follow naturally when your identity is aligned with your aspirations. Conclusion. You're standing at a pivotal moment. The tools, strategies, and insights you've gained aren't just theoretical concepts. They're the building blocks of your new identity. Every chapter in this audiobook has been designed to rewire your brain, reshape your habits, and reconstruct your relationship with discipline. But knowledge without action is meaningless. The transformation you've undergone isn't just about new habits or better strategies. It's about fundamentally changing who you are at your core. The old version of you who needed motivation to take action? Gone. The person who relied on willpower to stay consistent? Replaced. The self who made excuses and postponed success? That's no longer you. But here's the critical part. This transformation isn't complete until you live it. Hearing about these strategies isn't enough. Understanding the psychology isn't enough. Even agreeing with every word isn't enough. The only thing that matters is action. Your next chapter isn't here. It's written in your choices, your actions, your daily decisions to embody this new identity. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you strengthen it. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you reinforce it. Every time you take action without hesitation, you prove it. So what happens now? You close this audiobook and step into your new identity. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when circumstances are perfect. Now. Because the person you've become doesn't wait for perfect conditions. They create them. The person you've become doesn't need motivation. They take action regardless. The person you've become doesn't make excuses. They make progress. Your transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. But only if you choose it. Only if you live it. Only if you become it. You're no longer the person who struggles with discipline. You're no longer the person who needs motivation to act. You're no longer the person who makes excuses. You are discipline embodied. You are consistent action personified. You are unstoppable execution made real. Now go prove it. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.